Granny's wedding. It starts with a breeze. The children engage in the usual frivolity around the tall wooden jerry pole. It's a little time worn now and has lost the smoothness it once possessed, but it still is a crucial part of the villager's life. The breeze picks up, bringing with it dust and sand, which prickle the children's faces and irritates their eyes. They morosely decide to end their games for the day and tread back home with dejected faces. Later that evening, all hell breaks loose. Dark, heavy clouds swirl over the tiny village and break out in such angry downpour that it becomes difficult for the people to hear one another over the thunder and lightning. Unlike the clouds and the rain, the lightning and the thunder, the wind, miserable in its loneliness, howls all night, uprooting trees, banging on windows, and tearing leaves off branches. Dawn brings with it the full realization of the terrible scene outside. It seems as if the whole village has been ransacked by a giant bratty child. Raghu carefully ventures out of the house, trying not to step on anything sharp. There seems to be a lot of commotion, and he somehow feels the storm isn't the only reason. People are crowded around in a clearing with creased foreheads and squinting eyes, trying to peep over each other's shoulders. Raghu pushes his way through the crowd to see what the racket is about. What he finds leaves him gawking. The 50-foot tall jerry pole, which had been standing proud for as long as the villagers could remember, the one constant reason for them to celebrate every year, the one whose strength had been taken for granted by all of them, has been broken in half by the ruthless storm. The upper part lies on the ground, while the lower jagged end, now slightly tilted, sticks out of the soil, forlorn and defeated. It seems to Raghu that it is looking to the heavens and cursing the sky. The jerry pole had always been the center of all village activity, from playing children to chattering oldies, from dispute settlements to weekend markets. Everything had happened around the pole. There was a time, years ago, when its main purpose was to set up marriages. But now, with the pole gone, the very soul of the village seems to have lost its mirth. People start whispering about how this is a bad omen, that it is the harbinger of nasty days to come, something that will leave a dreadful scar on their tranquil home. Hiraman arrives in the next 15 minutes, accompanied by other members of the panchayat. They gaze at the broken pole for a while and then huddle in a small group, whispering. "Quiet, everybody!" the sarpanch shouts when they are done. He whistles to grab everyone's attention. What has happened is indeed very sad. The pole has been part of our tradition and culture for ages, and it is thus our moral duty to not let this tradition die. I, along with my fellow panchayat members, have taken the obligatory decision to find another pole to replace this one. For this, we will first need to survey the forest thoroughly for a tree that is worthy of being a replacement for our beloved jerry pole. All kind men and women who wish to volunteer for the worthy cause may report to the Gram Panchayat office to register. Registration for fetching the tree will take place separately at a later time. Thank you. The people disperse, some going straight up to the office without a second thought, and some heading back home to ponder whether the idea of preservation of culture is worth the effort. Shiva reaches home, only to find his mother sitting on the mattress and sobbing. When she sees him, her sobs turn into loud wails. "What's wrong, Ma?" Shiva rushes up to her. "Oh, my dear Shiva." She wipes away a tear. "I'm surprised it hasn't occurred to you yet." "Shh, calm down. People will hear." "To hell with them. You listen to me. Your father and I, we got married, thanks to that very pole. This, to him, feels like the greatest epiphany of all time. Of course! In the earlier days, young women would be given 3-meter-long sticks to poke and jab at the boys trying to climb the grease-coated pole. If any boy succeeded, he would have the right to choose a bride then and there from among the girls jabbing their sticks at him. If he failed, well, better luck next time. I remember how valiant he had been, fighting against all us girls to climb that tall pole. He did slip, though sometimes dangerously low, but I never once saw a hint of defeat on his face. To tell you the truth, I didn't really do my part trying to bring him down. He had to make it to the top for me. People are peeking in through the window now, and some even through the door. Children are stealthily snaking into the room to enjoy the show. Did I ever tell you what he did when he got the money kept at the top? She pauses for effect. He bought me my wedding sari. He was a noble man, Shiva, and now that the pole is broken in two, so is my heart. She sniffles and continues. But I wish for you to be part of the search for the new Jerry, Shiva, in your father's memory. You will help out, won't you? Later, not now, he sighs. Please, you can do this much for me, can't you? He stares at his mother, exasperated. Fine, I will do it, but I won't waste my time looking, because I know you will ask me to go and help with setting up the pole too once it's found. So I will go when the actual job starts, okay? Okay, you don't know how much this means to me. She makes her way out of the house, wiping her face with her pallu. Almost half the village has shown its willingness to search for the perfect tree out of which the replacement pole will be carved, which is quite an overwhelming number. They split up into teams of 2 and look in all possible direction, combing every inch of the surrounding forest, but to no success. After quite a few days of fruitless perspiration, most of the pairs bail out. One fine evening, though, 2 of the volunteers emerge at the village boundary, dusty and tired, but with jubilant expressions. People crowd around them, praying for some good news. We found one! Yes! You people don't know all the things we went through for the sake of this village, says one gloating. It's a teak tree in a valley on the other side of the state border, says the other. It's a beautiful sight, but the locals told us not to be fooled by what meets the eye. They say the place practically swallows people up. It's a dangerous place. Apart from a few exceptions, us included, the jungle doesn't show much mercy. Many people who have ventured in the past have not returned. That doesn't sound like a big deal at all, Shiva exclaims sarcastically. But I'm not sure if any of this is true, says the gloater. Maybe the locals don't want us taking anything from their precious forest, so they made the whole thing up. He makes a face at his partner. But there is still a chance he could be right, says the Sarpanch. Let us not dismiss the information we have. We have no reason to be disheartened. We will definitely be cautious. Yes, but this is something that really needs to be done. Tell me now. Hiraman turns to the heroes of the day. How tall is the tree? Around 60 feet, I think. So after cutting off the excess, we should be left with a little over 40 feet? That's good enough, says Hiraman, nodding. Good enough, says the pompous one. It's perfect. Yes, perfect. Now we must take action soon. The day of the Jerry is fast approaching. We have just half a month to prepare the pole. Again, all men who would like to go should inform the Gram Panchayat office. You two will be going, of course, he says to the exhausted pair. Also, there's one more thing. Hiraman hesitates. It would be preferable if all of this is carried out on a voluntary basis. Free liquor will be provided to all those willing to go, to keep them pumped. However, village funds are running low, so if you had been hoping for money in return, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I just wanted to make that clear. A collective groan goes around the crowd. That's a shame. I was hoping that. How do they expect us to? The men burst out in protest. But the parsimonious Sarpanch silently slips away. The sky is bright and clear, in sharp contrast to Shiva's current mood. He is standing at the Gram Panchayat office gate along with 20 other men. He had known this day would come, but he hadn't expected it to arrive so soon. He makes a disgusted face at the sun and then turns his back towards it, which soon feels baked. Hiraman smiles. I am extremely happy to see you all. Respect for one's culture is rare these days. We have all gone through what needs to be done, so I hope there is no confusion. Remember, wait till it's dark. We don't want any trouble with the forest department. I wish you victory. Be successful and of course, be careful. Don't go missing. He ends his motivating speech with a laugh. On this happy note, the men start off on their journey into the deep forest. They are all carrying with them one bedsheet each, which they know will come in handy later. The more spirited ones among them are also carrying axes. They will be the ones bringing the tree down. Accompanying them are 5 bullock carts, trundling along the Kacha path, the bullocks munching away on every grassy patch they can find. While the others are enjoying their day out, singing and joking around to Shiva, their seemingly endless walk seems like a punishment for a crime he hasn't committed. When they finally reach the edge of the forest, they set up a cozy little camp, spreading their bed sheets on the ground and waiting for dusk to descend. Shiva's continuous yawns are punctuated with annoyed groans as he swats away mosquitoes and flies. Vasudeva passes bottles of liquor around. Shiva sees the others smoking their chillums and regrets not bringing his own, reluctantly asking to share theirs. When night settles and the crickets begin to chirp, the men tie their bullock to their carts and march into the woods fearlessly. Lighting their way are flame torches, their unpredictable flickerings threatening to start a forest fire if the villagers aren't careful. Once they find the tree, a few of them attack its tough bark with their newly polished blades. Within half an hour, the trunk gives way and the tree falls to the ground. Small animals and birds screech and scuttle away in fear. Here comes the work. Shiva grudgingly gets up from his seat and wedges his torch firmly between the branches of a nearby tree. Taking a swig of the glorious grape water, he hauls an axe over his shoulder and walks up to the giant of a tree, contemplating what the right angle would be to start chopping. Once decided, he takes a deep breath and lands his first blow, chopping away at the branches, careful not to hit the main trunk. Neither the humidity nor the teeming insects deter the men from their mission. Sweat and a few occasional cuts are of course part of the package. It takes the 20 grown men 2 full hours to get the job done. Even Shiva admits, despite all the hard work and winning, that the tree really is a fine piece of nature's work. But little do the men know that this is just the beginning. The hardest part of the expedition is yet to come. The men start to collect the newly hacked off branches, cutting off the tender shoots and leaves to smoothen out the wood as much as possible without affecting the toughness of the branches. At long last, when they have collected just enough, the real work begins. With the bed sheets folded on their shoulders to cushion the weight, the 2 men who had found the tree walk up to either side of the trunk and place a branch across their shoulders, ready for the challenge. The others lift one end of the trunk up, position it above the branch the 2 men are carrying, and let the weight fall on their shoulders. Then all the men steadily take up their positions behind the first 2. It is soon Shiva's turn. This looks like so much fun, he groans. Using all of his remaining strength, he pitches in. The breath is knocked out of Shiva's lungs as the full weight of the tree falls on him. He feels suffocated. He knows that within the next few minutes, his face will go embarrassingly red. And thanks his stars for the cover of darkness. Maybe they would have done better to bring more men. If they grow up now, all their effort will come to naught. But the load is just too much to handle. Jai Jari Mata! The voice comes from behind Shiva. He doesn't know who has said it, but he knows why. Shiva too feels like screaming would be a great idea. Jari Mata ki! Without thinking twice, the others follow with a loud Jai! Jari Mata ki! Jai! Their rhythmic chants echoes through the woods. The men manage to haul the huge tree's weight with just their bare backs and hands, trudging across the uncertain forest floor. Dawn sneaks in through the canopy of trees, lighting up, even if slightly, the grateful men's way, who have had to leave their torches behind. But the sunlight also means they are short of time. The forest guards will soon be on their rounds, and they don't want to land into a soup. Time for a break. I can't take it anymore, says Shiva's partner in between desperate gasps. After nearly an hour of the Herculean task, no one complains. They try to carefully put the trunk down, but it proves too much for their weary shoulders, and the tree hits the ground with a thud. Ow, my shoulder. I think I'm bleeding. Shiva's own shoulder and head feel like they are on fire. They all try to look at their wounds, giving in to the human tendency of comparing their agonies. I never thought it would be this bad, says one, hissing as he touches his injury. This couldn't get any better, says another, wincing. No sooner are the words spoken than a few nimble drops of water fall right on his nose. Oh God, you must be kidding! Another one cries out, looking at the raindrops on his bruised arm. Before long, rain drenches the man, dousing out any remaining zeal. I never should have come, mutters Shiva. Watch your mouth, Shiva, snaps the man beside him. Negativity is the last thing we need. We are more than halfway through. We have to push on. He tries to sound positive, but it falls flat. Anyway, we need to get this over with. It's almost light now, and I can't wait to get home. Despite their protests, everybody gets back on their feet. Picking up their respective branches and their sloppy bed sheets, they get to work again, shouting their Jari Mata slogans. How dramatic can this get? Thinks Shiva as he tries to hoist the trunk back on his shoulders. His vision keeps blacking out. He loses track of time. And after what seems like ages, it could really just be a few minutes, the trees start to thin out. The morning rays now fall on their weary feet as they lumber along. He can hear the bells on the bullocks' necks now. Almost there, and we are through. Shiva feels like lying down and just sleeping there forever. But he knows that's not an option. The men line the bullock carts up like kindergarten students, load them with their hard-earned prize, and head back home for some well-deserved rest. Shiva quietly makes his way to the last cart in the line and manages to find just enough space for himself to sit in. His eyes hurt. He closes them and almost immediately falls asleep. The rhythmic tinkling of the bells acts as the perfect lullaby. The familiar sound of drum rolls wakes Shiva from his slumber. He feels refreshed, although it couldn't have been more than half an hour that he had dozed off. He jumps off the cart and walks to the front. The path has been lined with lime. The village awaits them just a few steps away now. The people ogle at the size of the future pole, and Shiva feels proud. Men and women of all ages dance to the beat of the celebratory drum rolls. Shiva sees his mother crying happy tears, and a wave of satisfaction sweeps over him. All of his work has, after all, paid off. They get a hero's welcome. Shiva is smothered with hugs and pats, both from those he knows and those he barely does, and is almost choked with welcome jaggery shoved down his throat. Liquor flows freely, and it seems like nobody has plans to go to work that day. Shiva laughs, a loud, happy laugh. He can't seem to stop. He has done it. He has become part of the history and heritage of the village. He has, with literally his sweat and blood, given the village its Jerry back. Here he goes. The girls seem pretty tough. I see what they mean by girl power. Ah, he's through. Whoa, come on. Oh, that must have hurt. No, don't slip. The newly elected jury is being climbed and Raghu finds himself giving a nail-biting commentary inside his mind as Salil puts his masculinity to the test in front of the entire village to get the money from the top of the slippery pole. No, come on, show them what we boys can do. That's it, you can do it, almost there. Just when Salil really starts putting his back into it, a roaring engine sounds at the back of the crowd. Salil is now halfway up, but at the sudden sound loses his grip, slipping an inch or two. Beep! The horn tears through the air. The crowd goes silent as everybody turns to stare wide-eyed at the outrageous disturbance. Salil slides down the pole when he sees the grim-looking uniformed man sitting behind the green jeep's wheel. Nobody notices Salil landing on the ground with a soft thud. Everyone turns pale when they realize who the man is. They know in an instant that their celebrations haven't just been disrupted, but now stand cancelled for the day and perhaps forever. What is going on here? Inquires the man, jumping off the jeep. It's only now that it hits Raghu. The man is the forest range officer. Panic engulfs him. The sea of people fidget around, talking and whispering, not really knowing what to do with themselves. Beep! It's that terrible horn again. Don't waste my time. I'm not here to look at your faces, he barks. Fetch me your sarpanch. Before long, Hiraman presents himself to him, his face wrinkled with worry. Namaste, Sahib, he says, sounding surprisingly composed. What do you think you are up to? We need to talk, comes the stern reply. Ji, Sahib. Now I will ask you a few questions and you will be honest with your answers. Ji, Sahib, no lies. Hiraman's confidence surprises not just himself but the entire village. Raghu actually finds himself looking to the man to save the day. True, all Hiraman does at school is mess around. But in matters such as this, he has always the tough village sarpanch. Nice pole, says the forest officer, eyeing the jury. The sarpanch raises an eyebrow. Yes, a real beauty. Where did you get it from? The officer demands. Sahib, don't take this the wrong way. We needed to do this, or else it... Spare me the misery. Cut to the chase. Just tell me the truth. He stares at Hiraman unblinkingly. The air is thick with tension. I will ask you only one more time. Where did you get the pole from? Hiraman exhales. From the other side of the border. That territory isn't under my jurisdiction. But since I am here now, he glances at the pole. Why did you do it? Was it from my reserve forest? I'm not very sure, but I think it was from an allegedly ill-reputed valley of Temni, not very far from here. The officer nods. That is reserved. The reason doesn't matter, and ignorance is a silly excuse. You have gone against the law and you will be prosecuted. I have to take action. The people wait soundlessly for the verdict to be announced. Give me the names of all those who went to get it. Quick! Raghu's heart jumps right up to his throat. Baba! One of the panchayat members scurries away to do as ordered. And you, Sarpanch Sahib? The officer stares Hiraman down. You are in deep trouble. Also, did I mention? I am worried and sorry, but I am going to have to take your dear pole away. This tips the villagers over the edge. The elderly start wailing and thumping their chest. Men and women start yelling and children start complaining. Everyone is shouting and cursing the officer with the worst things they can think of. Hiraman walks up to him to make him see some reason. They seem to be having a civil discussion which soon turns into a heated debate. Sorry, you don't sound very sorry to me, Raghu bellows. But he doubts anyone even a foot away can hear him. That doesn't stop him, however, from yelling out a few more things that his mother wouldn't be very proud of. All round him, the hue and cry is beginning to get out of hand. The officer presses the horn yet again for an annoyingly long time, but it has an effect opposite of what was intended. Instead of quietening down, the roar of the crowd gets louder. The officer looks to the Sarpanch, his confident eyes now tinged with worry. He doesn't seem to want to ask for help, but Hiraman understands that he needs it nevertheless. The Sarpanch gestures to him to sound the horn once more and steps in front of the crowd himself. He raises his hands and shouts out, "Calm down, everybody." It takes Hiraman a mammoth effort and countless false assurances to just get the crowd to be less noisy, which is in no mood to listen to his entreaties. "I have made my decision," the officer shouts. A sudden silence falls upon the crowd as everyone looks on. "I have talked to your Sarpanch and he has told me all that I need to know. I see that the teak tree was felled for the villagers' good, for a community purpose. Therefore, I will take no, or rather minimal action. You people have no reason to be agitated." Relieved murmurs sweep through the crowd. However, he continues, and Hiraman thinks he sees him hesitating. "I simply cannot ignore the fact that you people chose to steal from a reserve forest without the consent of the forest department. I still need the list of those who were involved in the felling of the tree, in case my seniors decide to do something about it, which, again, isn't worth troubling your minds with." He looks at Hiraman, who politely smiles back at him. "I will also need the surety that this will not be repeated, no matter what, or else let me warn you, mercy will not be shown twice." "I give you my word, Sahib," promises Hiraman. "You won't have to visit our humble village again." "I too hope so." The officer stares at Hiraman for a moment longer than would be usual. What now? Raghu thinks. But the officer just nods and climbs back into his tree, looking thankful to be getting out of the place. He drives away, leaving in his wake a stream of black smoke. "Hiraman, who do you think ratted on us?" asks an upset Panchayat member. "I have a feeling, a very strong one, that this is Rao's mess. At least this got you in people's good books. You have risen in everyone's esteem. The next election will be easy for you," comments another. "Shh," Hiraman scolds. "Don't say all this in public." As the sun sets over the hillside, Raghu leans against a wall looking at the jerry. He can see the silhouette of the little bundle tied at the top, still intact the way it had been in the morning. Raghu is awfully aggravated by the drama adults create sometimes. Why can't they just live and let live? What fun is it to spoil everybody's day? It seems to Raghu that Rao is probably the biggest wretch in the village. He has discussed with his friends the happenings of the day, and it seems everyone has reached the same conclusion. It must have been the landlord. It had to be. Why else would he not be there when the officer had come? Why had he, being the head of the opposite party, not taken active part in bringing the jerry to the village? Let alone participation, he hadn't even said so much as a word on the matter. His neutrality on the subject has made him a highly suspicious character in the eyes of the entire village. Raghu saunters back home, his mind troubled by the unnecessary game of politics. With each step he takes, he kicks a pebble, taking it all the way to his house, his mind brimming with thoughts. Reaching his doorstep, he senses something wrong. He can hear faint, sobbing sounds, definitely Dadi, and a soothing, consoling voice he can recognize just about anywhere, his mother's. He knows that going inside will mean putting a stop to whatever is going on or is about to commence. Shiva, it was supposed, sunset, really miss Jerry, bad. He waits outside. Before long, Shiva walks into the house without so much as giving his son a glance. "Arre? What's wrong now?" his father exclaims. "There you are," she sniffles. "What happened?" "Oh, you know, the jerry. It is supposed to be taken down before sunset, and it's almost 8 now. There's a terrible sign, Shiva. It's an appalling omen," she wails. So this is what it's all about? I should have known, thinks Raghu. But that's not it. There's something more, something he never could have thought was coming. I just realized, Shiva, it never occurred to me before, but see, I'm an old woman now. She controls her sobs enough to speak through them, and there's no telling when she continues after a pause. You know. Oh, Ma, Shiva breathes out. No, let me finish. So I was wondering if you could just climb the cherry once in my presence. If I could just see you, my life will have had real meaning, Shiva. It will be the one true homage you can pay your father. Let's see, Shiva thinks to himself. Salil and the others have already climbed part of it before, so a lot of the grease must have come off. That should make it easier. It will earn me a good name in the village too. Plus, Ma will be content. It is so silent that Raghu can hear his own heart thumping wildly. What's it going to be? Shiva takes a deep, long breath and exhales, equally elaborately. I will do it, Ma. Stop crying, please. You are breaking my heart. Shiva is caked with grease. His arms, his vest, his legs and even his face is coated in dirty olive cream. Be that as it may, there is no stopping Raghu's proud grandmother from embracing her son. Shiva hands her the lump of grimy red cloth with twinkling eyes and a delighted grin. Both mother and son untie the knot together. Shiva picks the crisp green notes from inside and holds them up, displaying to the villagers his pride. Woo-ho! All right. Well done, Shiva. While the villagers cheer on, Raghu sits in a corner with his head against somebody's door. He catches sight of his mother, clapping her hands, laughing and just looking so happy. He smiles. Looking at her has always made him smile. But then he also notices something else. His ma seems to be on the sidelines, neglected by his father in his moment of glory. And just as suddenly, Raghu's smile fades away. He sees her coughing yet again, receding from the public eye. He worries for her a lot, and sometimes it feels like he's the only one. Raghu keeps sitting there as the pole disperses, and the sun sinks behind the hills. Ansh comes by to congratulate Raghu on his father's achievement, but he brushes it off as pure luck. They talk for a while before Ansh also leaves. Raghu usually doesn't like being alone because then it becomes hard for him to keep away the thoughts that inevitably comes his way. But now that he is by himself, there is no escaping them. He thinks back to how natural his father had been with the villagers earlier that day, joking and laughing, chewing pan with them, folding his hands to thank everyone who congratulated him. How everyone kind of gelled along with his personality without any fuss. If everyone finds Baba easy to be with, maybe there is nothing wrong with them. Maybe something's off with his own self. Maybe that's why I don't get along with Baba. Okay, no, enough. He gets up, brushes the dirt off his shorts and starts walking home. He tries to keep his mind blank all through the way, or else he knows he will not be able to sleep that night. Just as he is about to enter the house, he overhears the elders' conversation yet again. See, he did it! Ma's sweet voice tinkles in Raghu's ears, finding its way straight to his heart. He looks in through the window. I knew. I did it only for you, Ma. Shiva smiles. Ma was talking, right? Why did he have to interrupt her like that? His grandmother gazes at her son's face with eyes so full of love it makes Raghu sick. Yashoda just stands there, fumbling for something to do or say. I will go make some tea, she blurts out, darting out of sight. As they are left alone in the room, Shiva's mother takes her son's hands in hers. A tear rolls down her cheek. Even if I die this instant, I will die in peace. Thank you. Oh God! Raghu rubs his forehead. He steps into the house and, ignoring Shiva, heads straight to the kitchen.